Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Your Best Life with Lisa. In March 2020, the global pandemic changed life as we knew it. We had hard economic times, record high unemployment, and civil unrest. The global situation affected the mental health of many people. In 2018, 48,000 Americans died by suicide. Every suicide is a tragedy. Suicide affects families, it affects communities, and it affects entire countries. Suicide has long-lasting effects on the people left behind. Sometimes life can seem daunting, and you just need a friend to listen to you or remind you how much they care and that you were loved. Today's show is just that, a reminder for you that we care, all of us care. Today, we will hear from 3 guests that will share their personal stories about how they turned tragedy into advocacy after losing a loved one to suicide, and how they are living their best life after tragedy. Today's show is a reminder to all of us about the importance of hope. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome back. Whether you're an empath or not, you have to work at making yourself happy, right? It's really about knowing yourself. A lot of it is really about knowing yourself. Books, friends, whatever you need. We're all going through stuff. We can all use extra support. You have to be brave enough to admit to yourself that I have the wrong people in my life. Then you have to be brave enough to want to make a change. My first guest is Ishan Hines. Ishan turned to faith, hope, and love when his family survived the trauma of losing a loved one to suicide, August 31st, 2007. Ishan talks about his family's experience with suicide through music, writing, and the spoken word. Ishan, whose stage name is Purpose, explored his own mental health and bouts of depression. He continued to engage with others on the topic of mental health and suicide awareness. My Brother's Keeper was born. There's a stigma around Black suicide. His growing platform tries to open this dialogue, specifically within minority communities. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well.
It's so good to have you. We've been planning this show a long time.
Yeah.
So
it's the right time.
It was definitely the right time.
Yeah.
So in preparation for the show, I spent a lot of time on your social sites and your Instagram and your Twitter. And I read this, and I really wanted to talk about this because this is really the goal of the show. You said, suicide prevention starts with love. If we grab hands together, we can hold on. Man, that's a powerful message right there. So let's hold on together and get through this show.
Yes.
Share your story.
Absolutely.
So you're very committed to the community. You're very committed to mental health awareness. Can you share with us when that all started for you? Where did your story start?
Well, it started when my brother Atif died, August 31st, 2007. I had never really thought about suicide. I never really thought about the importance of therapy, and it was really something that wasn't really talked about within my community, within the bodies of church. Just different institutions of faith really don't talk about mental health or suicide at all. But this was a shock to my family. Then it sent me through my own journey of depression, my own journey of overcoming depression and learning different information and relationships that were out there and resources that were out there to help people who were battling the pitfalls of depression and hopelessness. So that started with the death of my brother, but then my own personal experience with depression, dealing with his loss of life, but also the circumstances that I faced with my own adversity in life from just whatever life faces us with, every one of us, right? None of us are exempt from the human experience.
Yeah, you know what? That's so true. None of us are exempt from the human experience, and I think it's interesting how we all struggle in our own personal way with whatever we're dealt.
Yes.
And I think shows like today and you being on is important because we're sharing that you're not alone and that there's always help. You know, and it's interesting, you and I were talking earlier about why are these conversations so difficult, right? So we're just gonna talk as 2 friends and get it all out, you know. So your brother died by suicide in 2007, correct? Yes. So the shock, and then how did you deal with the shock initially and start talking about it? Because I think that's the hardest part, right?
Okay, yeah. Initially there was guilt. There was a lot of regret there was times where I used to think about our sibling rivalry when we were children and wonder, was there anything that I did as a child that could have made him feel a certain way about himself and his identity as he grew up. So there was initially a shock and a guilt that I find to be common with a lot of people who lose someone to suicide. So that was true for my family. It was true for my particular experience, but then also his friends and everyone. There's a level of guilt and then blame, looking around to see where other people were negligent or abusive. So that was the initial shock and initial experience for our family.
I can't imagine the level of guilt, because even when people, when a loved one passes and you know that they've been sick, by cancer or something else, you always think of, what could I have said? What could I have done differently, right?
Yes.
So how did you work through that? How did you get yourself to go through that process with you and your family together?
Well, it's an ongoing process. For me, therapy was a key for me, because through therapy I was able to hear things that were about my identity, but also being able to learn things, even through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, learning certain things that are going on within a person that have nothing to do with another individual. True, we all can help other people hold on, but sometimes when people have made up their mind, that's a decision that they've made that has nothing to do with another individual. Of course, other people can send people over the top. If you're having a bad day and you have somebody tell you something that's very disrespectful or painful, it can send you over the top. But it was a journey, and it's still an ongoing journey to remember my brother's life and not just the way that he died. So that's what helps me, remembering the life that he lived and the type of love that he showed while he was here. That helps me to not live with as much regret, to focus on his life.
How amazing that you sit there and you're saying, I live with the type of love, because I read some wonderful things about your brother. So
yeah, he was great.
Sounds like he was a great guy. And it's interesting because I think a lot of times people expect that a person who is struggling looks a certain way, or we expect them to look a certain way, act a certain way. Were there any signs that your brother was struggling at any point when you look back?
Not at all. My brother, even the day that he died, he carried on his day as a normal day. He did his laundry, he ran errands. He never really talked about things that he was dealing with, whether there was disappointment, loss, grief, whatever. He never showed any signs. Now, again, with the training that I've been receiving and some of the relationships with AFSP that I've had, been able to realize like there are some signs and there are some things that can happen, some conversations that we can initiate that other people may not initiate. So I know my brother was going through a breakup. He was going through separation of his nuclear family situation that he had with his daughter and his daughter's mom. Now, I don't know if that had anything to do with why he's not here, but I know that there's certain things that I could have probably talked to him about, or that I should have engaged the conversation for. But again, I don't know why he's not here anymore. He never left us any indication. He never left a letter explaining why he made that decision or anything.
So 2007 is when your brother died by suicide. And then you say in 2018 is really when it hit home for you, when you were struggling. Can you share what that was like for us?
So even being an advocate for mental health and suicide prevention and awareness, I still have my own battles within with the demons or the dark sides. And I've been consistently in therapy since October 2018. But October 16, 2018, I found myself with a plan to take my life. I was dealing with a lot of grief. I was dealing with major heartbreak from a breakup from a relationship. I was just dealing with a lot of economic stress. Just a lot of things were hitting me at the same time. And I had my mind made up that I didn't want to be here anymore. I sent out a smoke signal to a friend that started off a chain reaction of people from my family all finding out about my plan and where I was in this broken state. And I was overwhelmed by love and support. And through that became a sincere journey to like take this serious and say, you know what, I'm going to be dedicated to going to therapy. I'm going to be dedicated to speaking out about what I really feel inside instead of having general conversations. I'm going to have the authentic conversations. And through that became a different life for me.
So you talk about a smoke signal that you sent.
Yes.
And can you tell us what the smoke signal was?
It was pretty direct, actually. It was a text
okay.
message saying, I don't want to be here anymore, and I'm sorry, but I'm leaving. And
so it was a direct message, I need help.
Yes, it was a text message. But in hindsight, I realized that I still hadn't made up my mind that I was leaving fully, because I wouldn't have sent anything out to help and to reach out where I could have received help. And I'm grateful that I did do that, because I was dealing with rejection And that moment, I was able to receive so much love, and that helped me to just feel like I was significant and to just be cared for in a certain way. And I needed that.
I think we all need that at different times of our life to feel significant.
Yes.
And I think it's very brave of you to come on and share your story, because I think the love that you're speaking of and the feeling significant is really, really important. I think it's tough to remind ourselves,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That we're human and we need others, and we need to reach out and say to people, because we're not supposed to be here and get along alone, right? We need that, our help. So you talk about having sincere conversations and a sincere journey. Were you saying that from 2007 to 2018, you were on a journey, but it wasn't sincere necessarily? Can you explain what that means?
I was taking on the role of being an advocate, but not really being responsible with my own therapy. So I would assume the role of like a hero, but I still didn't realize I had so many wounds, and I didn't take the time to go through therapy and allow those things to come up. I didn't know what was in until I went through a breakup, and I was like, I didn't know all that was still under the surface. I didn't know I was still dealing with pain from childhood or from previous relationships that was now being manifest within this current breakup or disappointment. And that's what changed. I started going through therapy. I started being more sincere. I started sharing the broken parts of my story. Instead of just sharing statistics and sharing information and sharing my brother's story, I started sharing my own story, and that changed everything.
Well, I personally know that definitely is when you really start to be sincere and get serious about it. That's how my journey actually got me to where I am today with this, the journey of self-love and learning to like who I was and believing that I was just even good enough to be on TV. So I understand the pain and the journey that we all have to go on, but the journey continues, right?
Absolutely.
It's every single day. And you said something about therapy that I agree with, about how important, when you started therapy, you really started your journey. Mm-hmm. So advice for folks that are considering maybe that they're not, because let's face it, there's people out there that say, I'm never going to therapy. Right. I don't need therapy.
Right. Well, the advice I would give is to take advantage of it, to look at it as going to a regular doctor. If you were to have a gunshot wound, you wouldn't just ignore it. You would take advantage of whatever resources are there for healthcare and then also for rehab. So therapy is the same thing, if not even more important, because you're dealing with, when people have physical illnesses such as cancer or whatever, it also impacts the way that they're thinking. And we find, I don't know if there's stats to show it, but if somebody's mood is different, they may have hope and fight through things in a better way than if they don't have hope, right? So I believe therapy is very important. It's not something that should be considered taboo or something to be ashamed of. It's something that's readily available. It's something that's extremely confidential. There's laws about what is shared in therapy being shared publicly. There's resources within our jobs. A lot of programs are available with the jobs called the employee assistance program that a lot of people don't know are available for them. There's programs on college campuses. There's resources all through all student centers, even here at Temple University. There's so many resources that are just available that are here for a reason, and they're not there for you to feel bad about. They're there for you to take advantage of so that you can live and so that other people around you can live and you can be a better citizen in our community.
So speaking of Temple University,
yes,
I hear you told me that you were here for 4 years, right?
But I didn't finish.
But you didn't finish.
Yes.
Well, you can still finish one day, right?
Yes, I plan on doing that.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, I took a break in between my education too, and I ended up coming back to Temple and getting serious with my education and getting my degree. So yeah. So what was it like when you were here? You had a lot of struggles while you were here, right? So,
yeah. So when I came out of high school, I was really a successful student. I was valedictorian coming out of high school, and I was on a path to go to the military academies. I got accepted to West Point and Air Force Academy.
Wow.
So I was on a journey.
You didn't tell me that. We've talked how many times now?
I don't really talk about that
They
much.
always tell me the good stuff on that.
Yeah. So I had gone on a certain journey of just achievement, but I really was struggling inside to want to just have fun, to be free. And when I got to Temple, I had that opportunity. I just started wilding out on campus. I started just engaging in relationships, gambling, smoking weed, just doing the college life. And with that became no achievement. So I wound up having fun, but I stopped progressing. And I also was going through major disappointment. I went through some systemic stuff that kept me out of the military academy. They disqualified me for having asthma. So I wound up going to college with no scholarships, even though I had full scholarships everywhere. When I turned them down to go to the military academy, they were snatched from me. So I wound up in school on financial aid, and I took advantage of all the fun that was here, and I didn't focus on my education at all. And then I became a father. So then the responsibilities of raising children, they became more important than going back for my education. However, I will be getting my education.
However, when
Yes.
you get your education, you'll be back on my show, and we will
Okay.
talk about that.
We will.
But talk about your nonprofit organization that you started in your brother's honor.
Yes. So again, October of 2018 was my own journey through depression and mental health, and with that became an opportunity to connect with my community. I started having these meetings at the library, the local library.
You know what? I love that because
Yeah.
everything I've read, it talks about connection is so important. I'm sorry. I
No, you're
didn't mean to
fine.
interrupt you.
So with that became these community conversations called the community conversation. I'm sorry, I forget the exact name, but we started having these organizational meetings, and people would just come in and talk about their struggles, their experiences with fatherhood, with addiction, with motherhood, whatever they were going through. And through that became relationships with other people who became part of the organization. And we wound up creating a nonprofit organization called My Brother's Keeper Cares, also known as MBK Cares. And we became an official 501c3 last spring during the pandemic.
During the pandemic, it's interesting when you say that during the pandemic, unfortunately, so many, it was such a horrific year, one like
Yes.
we've never had. But during the pandemic, I think what has happened during the pandemic is people do understand now what it's like to feel the isolation and feel alone, and the conversations are more free-flowing, if you will.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that during the pandemic, you became an official, nonprofit organization ready to help people,
Yes.
right? Which is so awesome. And I just saw you just kicked up your Wednesday meetings.
Yes, Wellness Wednesday.
Wellness Wednesday,
Yes.
sorry, Wellness Wednesday. So
Yes.
if somebody wants to participate in a Wellness Wednesday, what can they do?
So every Wednesday, starting this Wednesday, April 7th, we're going to have the Wellness Wednesdays on the Facebook page for MBK Cares. So if somebody wants to follow along, they can go to the MBK Cares Facebook page, and they can watch it as this live stream via Zoom on our Facebook page. It's also available for replay on YouTube. All of our episodes from season 1 and season 2 are available, and season 3 begins this week. So if anybody wants to follow, all the content is available online, and it's amazing content on there.
You know what? It is amazing content because I spent a lot of time on there, and I just, I'm in awe. I guess I'm going to date myself here because every time I go online, I'm like, really, all the information you could ever want is right there at your fingertips.
Yep.
I remind myself, and I remind my kids too, of a time in our life where the information wasn't always there. You had to go to the library.
Yep.
I had to walk to a library and look through a card. But so your Facebook page, your YouTube, do you have a website that they can visit
Yes.
as well?
Everything is MBK Cares, so www.mbkcares. That's also our Instagram, IG, Twitter, and our Facebook information is available all under the same acronym, MBK Cares.
So I'm going to ask you real quick because we're
Yes.
going to go to a break. Well, we're going to take a break. We're actually going to continue our conversation with our second guest, Deidre Breckenridge, when we come right back.
Okay.
When I was growing up, my mom was extremely tidy. We were trained to put things back where we got them from. One day, when I walked into my mom's house, I felt like I walked to someone else's house. There was stuff everywhere. And just growing up the way I grew up, and to see this transition was very alarming.
When Sean talked to me, it was a wake-up call, and that's when I went to the doctor.
You can achieve a lot using your imagination. I mean, I don't like to brag, but wait, who's that? And why is she all over these achievement awards? But with STEM, the sky's the limit. Shaboom! Use STEM to envision. Okay, I'm seeing it. Yeah. Invent.
Got any ideas?
I've got a few, actually. And create a better world.
Told you she's super smart.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
Because of you, I felt hopeless.
I know it was a joke, but it still hurt me.
Because of you, I felt wanted and not alone in this world. Because you said hi to me on the first day of school, I felt included, and I knew that I was going to be okay.
Welcome back. Our next guest is joining us by Zoom. We are talking to Deidre Breckenridge with her personal loss and how she rekindled her best life. After the tragic loss of her 24-year-old stepdaughter, Noelle, Deidre and her husband, Mark, set out on a journey to share a global message of hope and heartfelt purpose. They want parents and children to discover the true meaning of the word feel and to embrace all the feelings that bind families and loved ones together. Today, she will share why feel is one of the most important words to explore and how families can witness the beauty that comes from the kindness, truth, and love of a child. Welcome, Deidre.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, I'm excited. You know, this is my first time having a guest doing this on Zoom, so I hope I do a great job and I make you proud.
Of course.
So tell us about why it is so important, the feel. I just want to jump right in and then we'll share your personal story, but I want to make sure that we really have enough time because, Deidre, I do this a lot. I say to my son, who's 17 years old, how are you feeling? But I'm not sure I'm asking it the right way or prodding the right way. So can you talk to us about that right off the bat?
Sure. So usually we hear, how are you? How are you doing? But not so much, how are you feeling? And that is much more personal. And my journey to find what feel means and how others feel is so important because what I realized after Noelle ended her journey was you never really understand how people feel. And when we did lose her, as a part of my grieving process, I launched a passion project just to speak with other millennials to get to the bottom of their feelings. And I'm happy to talk a little bit further about that.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to hear about that. You did an interview, you did a bunch of research. I'd love to hear all about that.
Yes. So what I did was I didn't realize that it was going to be a research study. It was more a part of my grieving process. And I gathered up as many millennials as I could. I reached out to friends and any of my professional colleagues to send over millennials who I asked the same questions. I asked them if they were showing up authentically to their conversations. What did they value and how did they want to be perceived? And what builds trust and a relationship? And what did they need from other people? And the stories I heard were eye-opening, many disheartening. And that's when I really realized that, especially out there on social media, with all the happy faces and the friends and the family photos, you never really know what's going on in somebody's life. And it's so important to tune in. And from all the stories that I heard, I looked at the data and I grouped it into what I call buckets. And all of the stories and data spelled a word, and that was feel. That millennials really want everyone around them to face fears or be open and inclusive. They want empathy. They want ethics and good judgment and truth. And the L in feel is love. They want love and compassion. So I learned a lot through this process.
So, Deidre, I think it's interesting that everybody wants that, right? Not just millennials, but I think it's interesting because I've been spending a lot of time lately talking about, and I'm sure you heard Deshawn's story as well, talking about asking people, like, how are you, and how to get past that, how to have a true, authentic conversation, especially during the pandemic, which was so, and still continues to be ever evolving and changing every single day. So we're all living in a time right now where every day is a change. So we want to get past the, how are you? And when someone says, I'm fine.
That's right. So that is the natural response. You have to have a level of comfort and safety and know that whatever you're going to say is met with kindness and caring. And that comes from empathy. And empathy, of course, has to start with listening and active listening. But what I found was really interesting is that many of us feel that we are empathetic. But what I learned was that there's different levels of empathy. And you could be operating on a level of cognitive empathy where you might recognize that somebody is struggling. So you adjust your tone or you adjust that tweet. Or maybe it is emotional empathy where you can actually understand because you know the circumstances around a situation. And then compassionate empathy, which it would be wonderful if we could all get there, because that means you can help someone with action steps to solve some kind of issue or problem. And those are the different levels. But once again, it didn't take, it took a lot of understanding. And then this notion of, let's find out how we can build a test to see how people really feel. And that was the next step toward taking feel to a greater level.
So you took feel to a greater level by giving the test out into where?
Well, we built a test online.
Okay.
It's feelfirsttest.com, and it's for professionals, and it's all generations. It even captures Gen Z who are still in school, and it's a 32 question test, which helps people to understand how much they face fears, they engage with empathy, they use ethics, they live with ethics, and they unleash their love or passion. And you go through the test, and what's interesting is that the test scores you and recommends an action plan or a roadmap of exercises that you can increase your level of feel. So it's just a way to discover and to take this notion of, do we really understand how people feel? Well, we can't understand them if we don't first understand how we're feeling. We have to be emotionally intelligent to manage the feelings and to tune into other people.
Well, learning about yourself is the greatest gift anybody, I feel like it's a journey we do every single day, and we try to get better and better every single day. You talked about empathy, and I kind of want to go back to that because empathy is a word that I don't know that if everybody really truly understands the meaning of. You gave us 3 different types of empathy. Can you possibly, for the viewers, give us an example of empathy, or when you're in the middle of a conversation, how to show empathy?
Sure. So an example of empathy, let's say in the workplace, when you're at the highest level of empathy, you are understanding so much the struggles that a colleague is going through. And when that person is sharing with you, not only are you listening and they feel comfortable, they trust you enough to help them solve something and to move forward to work through that struggle, whatever it is that's going on in the workplace. So empathy is walking in somebody's shoes and having that trust and understanding. But on the highest level, it's being able to help them move through something and to work through an action plan. So,
okay, that's a great, that tells us how to do it. Do you have any examples of a type of action plan? I always think of myself as an empathetic person, especially as an adjunct professor right now. I'm very empathetic to my students. I'm empathetic to the fact that they are on Zoom and they want to get back in the classroom. But I think you and I were talking the other day, I'm not really sure that I was exhibiting that to my students as much as I could. Do you have examples, or walk us through an example of how we could do an action plan, especially if we believe that somebody is suffering with some depression or mental health struggle?
So the first thing is to even recognize if you're listening. And we often think we're listening, but there are so many distractions around us, whether it's technology, the news, social media, your smartphone binging and pinging. So I would recommend, as a first step, to see if you're actually tuning in. And in the workplace, go into a meeting with your smartphone turned off, with all notifications off, with the ability, yes, we're working on Zoom, but to be able to actively listen means your body is leaning in when somebody's speaking. It means that your body is engaged, that you're actually taking notes so you can ask better questions and test yourself. and see if you can leave your technology behind. That's step number one. And then step number two, Lisa, I would say go back to some of those times with your students and when somebody was sharing or something was happening, and remember what you did, how you responded and how you reacted. And then look at those three different levels and say, did I just adjust what I said? Did I have a full understanding? Did they trust me to share more? And did I actually help them to move through something? And the more you can be reflective, that is so important in emotional intelligence, the ability to self-reflect. If you can self-reflect as an exercise, you will go farther and farther in your ability to be empathetic.
Well, you know, I wish they taught how to listen in kindergarten. then you would go all through, you know what I mean? Then when you're an adult, you become a better listener. I love your tip of, you know, leaving technology behind. You know, I'm sitting here with Ishan, and you heard his story, and we're talking about listening, right? Is there anything that you want to add, or that you can think of that you want to talk to Deidre about, that, you know, about listening and the importance of listening?
I think she said it perfectly. If there's anything to add to that, just be careful with your words in response to what you've heard. I think that she said the perfect definition of listening and being empathetic.
I think that's right. I think that Deshawn brings up an excellent point, actually, about listening, Deidre, and then also watching your words. And then you talk about being reflective. How important would you say it is for everybody, especially in today's world, you know, where we do have so many distractions and we do have so much going on, to journal?
Oh, absolutely. So journaling is an important part of your emotional intelligence. And it's also a way just to really get aligned with yourself. I do a morning routine of meditation, visualization, journaling, a little bit of light yoga. These are all ways to get in tune and to be present and self-aware. But the journaling is a way to definitely reflect and write things out. How can I do better? And this can only help you in your communication moving forward. And it's so important. And as parents, we really need to tune in and be present and reflect, especially with our children and what we went through. I know many families with the homeschooling and children being around. So it's really important to listen, be present, and to, of course, watch your words.
Yeah, so watching your words is an important one too. My son, actually, you know, he's been home for a year. He's been home, you know, he's a junior in high school, and he's been home. And I went into his room and I saw all these goals and objectives that he had. You know, he's going to go to the gym every day, and he's been doing it, right? But I saw a word that I didn't like, and he said, "So I can be good enough." Well, that, you know, but that was like a red flag to me. So I went into his room, Deidre, and I said, "What does this mean by, you know, you want to be good enough? You know, you were born good enough." And I went into this whole conversation with him, and he's like, "Mom, relax," meaning that I can be good enough to make the baseball team in high school, you know. But I think that these conversations are necessary and needed. I think what we need, Deidre, is more training on how to have these conversations.
Absolutely. And Lisa, believe it or not, one thing that I learned through my journey, and this sort of brings in the children's book that I wrote with my husband, is that all of the feelings and the values and what we learned from my study starts in the home. And that's where listening starts, and good practices of sharing and understanding what it means to be kind and caring and to show love and to be truthful. And that's why we wrote our book, A Whisper from Noelle.
I see it right behind you. You want to tell us about your book?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. So everybody grieves in different ways. And I was on my path with the millennial study. And it took my husband a while. He kept wondering, what is the best way to honor Noelle's legacy? And I think it was in 2020, yes, his father passed away. And he had these vivid memories of Grandpa always reading to Noelle, and they would read stories over and over and over again and fall asleep together. So he came to me and he said, you know, children's books are just a way to bond families together. I want to write a children's book. So we married the feelings and the values in a children's book so that children and parents can explore feelings together. And it's a book about a little girl who receives a series of whispers. So she's listening to an angel, Noelle, who shares with her messages of kindness and compassion and truth and love. And then Ashley Ann goes and shares this with her mom.
Oh my God. Do you love that?
Yeah,
We're sitting here, we're like, oh my God, do you love that? We want that book.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
We need to have that book. How can we get that book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon, and all proceeds of this book go to the College of New Jersey. And I just want to point out that Noelle was a research scholar. She was studying psychology, and she was awarded the Outstanding Research Scholar Award. They then named that award after her. So now all the proceeds go to that award, and 2 students every year receive an award to further their studies in psychology. So you can also go to our website, awhisperfromnoelle.com, and learn about the book and our collaboration with TCNJ.
You know, I always say that this show makes me a better person. I think this show is such a gift for so many reasons, but to be able to talk to you and to Ishan today and to share your stories, it's just really such an honor. And so I thank you both for being a part of today's very important show. Real quick, because we're going to take a break, is there you're on social media, Facebook, if people want to learn more about the Feel?
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm at Dee Breckenridge on Twitter. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And you can also go to my website, DeirdreBreckenridge.com, and I talk about the Feel model there.
Wonderful. Well, we will return in a moment with more of Your Best Life after these messages from TUTV, Temple University Television.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here.
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys, preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Back, our next guest is Marianne Murtha, who will share how she turned her loss into a mission of creating a smarter culture about mental health and how she rekindled her best life. Marianne started her volunteer work with Greater Philadelphia chapter of American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. During those years of volunteering, Marianne realized that she wanted to be a contributor to the mission of creating a culture that is smarter about mental health, specifically in the Greater Philadelphia region. Today, she's the area director for the Greater Philadelphia chapter of American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Welcome, Marianne. It's so nice to have you here.
Good morning, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know what? I'm going to dive right into it, right? Because you and I we've been talking about this show and prepping for this show and I want to share with everybody that honestly, I've been really stressed about this show because I want to make sure that I do a good job and I want to make sure that we have honest conversation. And I'm myself, and I'm comfortable in admitting that I'm uncomfortable at having certain conversations, right? And you and I shared, we shared a conversation months ago about this, you know, what's the language we should use? How should we talk about, you know, dying by suicide, death by suicide? So without further ado, I'm going to ask you to just give us some do's and don'ts or some talk about the importance of the language about suicide.
Well, I think everyone already said words matter. So when we talk about suicide, we don't use the phrase committed suicide. That is judgmental or accusatory when you hear that. As you mentioned, Lisa, I am a survivor of suicide, and when I hear that, it is a trigger for me, to be totally honest. We say death by suicide, die by suicide, killed themselves. When we talk about someone that actually may have attempted suicide, we say they have lived experience. We don't say failed their attempt or successful in their attempt. Again, there's no right or there's no failure or success in this. To lose someone to suicide is tragedy. So we actually at AFSP, we actually talk about what to say, what not to say. And then when we're talking to someone that may be struggling, we said it today more than once, have a real conversation. Listen with an open ears, open mind, and open heart. And express the love and concern you have for the person that may be having a crisis. So asking them, are you okay? Asking them if they have suicidal thoughts, that's okay. I know that there's kind of a misconception that if you ask, are you having suicidal thoughts, you're going to put suicidal thoughts in the person's head. That is, in some cases, the complete opposite. Asking that question in a way that is open, loving, and caring may do the complete opposite and have that person be able to talk about it because they trust you. And now they don't have the stigma that comes with that whole phrase when you say suicidal thoughts. It might be like relieving that pressure, and that person might be like, oh my God, this person really wants to hear how I am doing and how I'm feeling. And it's okay to share that I'm having these thoughts so that they will embrace me and they will help me.
So you learn something every day, because I did not know that. So you ask probing questions then. So suppose, what would you recommend if you have a gut feeling, right? You just think that somebody's not doing so great, but they keep telling you they're okay because they just don't want to open up to anybody. Some people just don't want to open up. What recommendations would you have for anybody who's watching?
It's like anything else. We talked about, I think Deirdre talked about asking the question, how are you doing? I'm fine. And we move on. We need to, if you see signs, someone's talking about ending their life, or they feel like they're a burden to the people in their lives, or the pain is so intense, or they just don't feel that they can go on. That's a warning sign. If their behaviors change, they start to drink or use drugs, they isolate from their families, their friends, or conversely, they're acting very recklessly. They're having sleep issues. They're sleeping too much or they're not sleeping enough. These are all, again, warning signs in behavior. If their mood changes, if they become really agitated, or they're showing depression, or they're expressing being humiliated all the time, or they're easy to fly off the handle, irritable, rage. These are all things that are indicators for us, as for those people that we love, and even ourselves, to stop and ask the question, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What is going on? And maybe you ask that once and they say, fine. That's not enough. You ask them again. You ask them again. In building any relationship, you have to build a level of trust that's unwavering. And if you keep asking and you keep telling them how much you care about them and you want to help them and you want to get them the help that they need and support them, they'll start to trust that. And you can you can get them to start to open up to you. Once you have that trust, then you want to help them, if they're already in therapy, reach out to their doctor. Or if they're not, try to find the right solution for them. And there are many, many ways that you can find that. If they're struggling and they're opening up to you, we have the suicide prevention hotline, and you can call 1-800-273-TALK, and you can be on the phone. There's counselors there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And you can tell the person that answers the phone, the counselor, that you are with someone that's struggling, and then and then make that transition with the person there and holding their hand, showing them that you're there to support them as they go through this journey, because it may not be that comfortable for them to open up to a complete stranger about how they're feeling. If they're not comfortable with maybe having that phone call, then we have a text line, and you would text the word TALK, TALK, to 741-741. And again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There are trained counselors that can engage in that text messaging back and forth to help the person find the help that they need. If it's a real crisis, we always tell everyone to call 911 and get the support that they need.
So you have these conversations, right? I mean, I think I am pretty good with having conversations. You have conversations with people, but you're still not feeling, can we call? Like if I have a student that, colleges all have hotlines, but if you have a friend that you're worried about, what do we call?
You can call.
Okay.
Yep.
We can call your hotline and say, we're concerned about John because John is exhibiting X, Y, and Z behaviors. And can we remain anonymous where you will reach out to this person?
Yes. And if you're really concerned, Lisa, about someone, you can always call the local authorities and ask for a wellness check, where the authorities will visit the location of the individual to check in on them.
Okay. So you've been listening to the show the whole time. You've heard Deshawn and I sitting here talking. You've heard Deidre. The goal of today's show is truly to put a face to suicide and get comfortable with using words like mental health, but no matter, I still believe that there's this big stigma around it. What would you say to somebody who's still struggling with, well, they don't want to talk about their mental health. They're uncomfortable about talking about the need or the desire for therapy?
I would I would share, and I think we all talked about this today. It's through our personal experience and storytelling and showing that we love and care for them. Again, it's not a one and done thing if somebody is really adverse to it. If for some reason you are very concerned about an individual and they are in major crisis, then I would definitely suggest that you call 911 and get emergency help immediately.
So we talked about the warning signs. We talked about how to have an open conversation. I really don't think we can spend enough time on the whole conversation piece. Would you agree?
Right.
I mean, pulling it out of somebody is difficult enough. And I think in today's world, we don't put our cell phones down enough, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if you heard, Marianne, at one point we were talking about journaling, and during break, Ishan turned to me and said that she raised an excellent point about journaling and the importance of it. Would you agree that journaling is an important piece for everybody who's just living life every day?
Yes. So we talk about mental health being holistic.
Okay.
Your mind, your body, your soul, and your surroundings. So things like exercising, getting a good night's sleep, journaling, eating right, all the things that we have forever talked about in taking care of our bodies are the same that we talk about in taking care of our mental health. We would go to the doctor, and I think Isan said that if you were, God forbid, had a gunshot wound, you'd go to the doctor and you'd take care of it. It's the same concept. And in some of our training, we will say, if someone's having a heart attack, you certainly wouldn't tell them to eat right then, but you would then help them work through what strategies. And this is not just for other people. We need to be very mindful of this for ourselves. Now more than ever, since the pandemic and the isolation, we need to exercise, we need to sleep right, we need to reach out to each other, we need to, I'm very much like Deirdre. Every morning I wake up, I meditate, I journal through my meditation, I do light yoga, and I spend some time in my quiet time for my faith. So those are the things that I do to keep myself focused and energized. And I identify very much, again, like Ishan said, when I started to identify through the isolation some struggles I was having, I did reach out and I was working with a therapist, and I continue to work with a therapist. Fell off the wagon a little bit a couple of years ago, but I had to re-engage in that to take care of myself, because what I tell everyone is, if I can't help others because I cannot pour from an empty cup. So really staying with somebody, talking to them often, even though we're sheltering in place still a little bit, reaching out, texting, calling, Zoom, Skype, whatever your mode of contact is, it's constant. It's not just, well, he said he was fine, so he must be fine. That's not okay. If you're really worried, you have to keep having that conversation to show that you care and love them and that you want them to live their best life.
I love what you just said. You said to show them that you care. I always tell my children that people will show you who they are and believe it and show you how they care. So all great tips. It's interesting because I guess, I'm sitting here on a college campus and surrounded by probably 20-year-old college students. Yes, I'm the old lady in the shoe. And at 54, I understand the importance of mind, body, and soul, right? And the importance of waking up and creating your day. I would love to spend a little bit more time, because I really want everyone who's watching this show, they're probably like, oh yeah, I just roll out of bed when they're in class and they just go to class. I really love to talk about the positivity that we need to put into our life, that we are responsible for putting positivity in our life, and that you said it, that we need to fill our cup. So we have like a few minutes left. What I would like to talk about is, how important would you say positive affirmations are during this time where we are, like you said, semi-isolating, not isolating, every day it changes. You have your vaccine, you can go out. You don't have the vaccine, you can't go out. So, Ishan, do you have any affirmations that you use on a regular basis?
Yes, so there's things that I listen to in music that I choose to listen to, but also like in the scriptures, like just different messages of affirming an identity that are contrary to whatever messages are playing in my head. So if rejection from a person is saying, you're not good enough or you're not worthy, what am I hearing from my God or from people who love me who are saying the total opposite of that? So being able to fill yourself with content that is different than what you're constantly hearing that causes a struggle. But then also with journaling, to go off of what Deidre and also Marianne were saying, I found it to be an opportunity to learn to be honest with myself, because I didn't have to worry about somebody else hearing or judging what I was saying. And then through that, I was able to tell myself positive things, and then to share different things within prayer and within therapy that I found as struggles before. So journaling helped with that. We've talked about journaling, we've talked about affirmations. I love what you said about
changing the content of what we hear. Changing the content of what we hear. So today I'd like to thank all of our guests for sharing their very personal stories about how they turn their tragic experiences into meaningful work and are working every day to remind us all that there's always hope. We all need reminders every day about how much we are loved, valued, and appreciated. And in case no one has told you today, let me be your reminder. You are loved. You are special. You and you alone are good enough. Please reach out and talk to your family or friend if you need help and tell them that you need them. You can also always call the National Suicide Prevention Line at 800-273-8255. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and until next time, I'm Lisa Bien, and I want everyone to live their best life. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome back. Whether you're an empath or not, you have to work at making yourself happy, right? It's really about knowing yourself. A lot of it is really about knowing yourself. Books, friends, whatever you need. We're all going through stuff. We can all use extra support. You have to be brave enough to admit to yourself that I have the wrong people in my life. Then you have to be brave enough to want to make a change.